Hello, this is the Milk, and I'm playing Neverwinter. I'm gonna show you some content from level 1 through 20. And it's gonna be some PvE, some PvP, and some general thoughts about the game. The first thing you want to think about when you create your character is the stats, because it's kind of the only thing that I encountered that can be a problem if you don't know about it, and you're gonna feel sorry if you don't know about it. So watch Cryparian's video on how it is with your stats, but basically you just have to create your character first. Go through the stats and look what the different effects are, and these are all the typical Dungeons & Dragons stats like strength, dex, and wisdom, intelligence, charisma. It's a lot of fun playing the game. It's a very epic intro. It's classical Dungeons & Dragons start, where you just wake up on the beach and you're very close to Neverwinter, and there's an ongoing invasion, which corresponds with the introductory cinematic. And the game is pretty cool to look at. It's very cartoony style, and sometimes it's a bit too blurred and there are some bad textures. Generally the environment is pretty nicely done, and I think the lighting is also decent at least, and it all wraps up pretty nicely for me also, because I like the Forgotten Realms to begin with. It's not something that's gonna blow you away if you just played Bioshock, for example. It's a pretty clunky animation most of the time. Some of the animation is pretty good when you're fighting and you really feel like there's a weight behind your attacks, but it's very puppet-like, the way that the NPCs move around town, and sometimes they just stick together. A lot of the environment in the quests is quite cool. Already from the beginning you are put on this giant bridge with really a lot to look at, and it just keeps on going. There's been some repetition in the dungeons, but mostly it's just beautiful new stuff every time I go into a new quest. The PvE in this game is pretty fun so far. A lot of it's been too easy, especially the first 10 levels, but then it starts to ramp up a little bit. I usually play the no potions game just to make it just a little bit more fun when it's too easy. Really, the combat feels a lot better than Guild Wars 2, which is the game I'm gonna compare it to, because it's not like Diablo, and it's not quite like World of Warcraft. You can't move when you cast an ability or when you attack. Some attacks you can move slightly, but it's not like Guild Wars, where you can just run around and use your attack at full speed all the time. The combat is a cooldown based system, so there's no mana in the game. There are some resources, like the action points you use for making kind of your ultimate ability. And there is also a class specific resource typically. Mine has divine power, and every time I turn it on, my abilities consume some of the divine power, but in exchange they also become more powerful and have different extra effects added to them. And it was a long time, or I think so, a long time before I died. This is level 10. And it's not even a monster, it's just me jacking off, and you'll see in a moment. Because there are traps in this game, and it's a minor nuisance. It's not like it's something that's gonna really halt your progress in any other way than it happens right here. And it sucks. There are also different kind of 5-man content in this game. This is a small skirmish, the first skirmish you get to do in the Black Lake district. It's basically a hold 'em off kind of affair, where you just defend wave after wave, and in this one there are 3 waves. I don't know really how these skirmishes are gonna fare in the future, but the first 2 you do at level 8 and 15 is the same structure, with 3 waves and then a final boss. And sometimes you get extra loot for completing these. And this is all part of the event system. And the event system is basically a way to incentivize doing special things, or specific things, while you play. And that could be, for example, an event popping up, it just started, and now you have 1 hour to complete a skirmish. And if you do that, you get an extra bonus, which so far has been astral shards, which is kind of incorporated in the way you also spend real money in this game. But most of the auction house trading, for example, goes on with the astral shards. They decided to do the outdoor zones a bit differently than most other games. They limited the amount of players that can go into a normal questing outdoor zone. And this is a way of trying to balance the fact that sometimes in an MMO too many players will be in one place and it'll just be too easy bashing the mobs, or you won't be able to get the certain boss you have to kill for a quest, for example. And so far it works quite nicely, but for example, if 5 of the 14 players in your area go AFK, then you'll have a more fun time usually soloing, because the content will get a bit harder, because people won't just come by and just help you kill your mobs or heal you or whatever. Sometimes if you die, it is the only way to be saved without having to go back and respawn. If somebody just randomly comes by and saves your ass, and that can really be a nice help. Usually the challenge around the outdoor areas is pretty light. Sometimes, as you can see in this battle, you do end up pulling a bit more mobs than you originally wanted, and you can have quite a fight, but usually you just don't. And especially if you got some kind of healing ability. I go full DPS with my cleric because I can just kill the mobs quicker and do things faster without dying. And if I'm not dying, then I don't need the healing. You do have to go to certain quest givers to get your missions, to get your quests, and sometimes you do have to backtrack just a little bit. I feel it's a much better solution than, for example, in the Guild Wars game, where you just have the quest all of a sudden when you go into an area. Like all the time you're just being shown the way of exactly what to do. I do like the fact that you have to sometimes go back and sometimes find a certain quest giver before you can do a certain quest. Because the quests are probably the best way to gain XP so far, I've experienced. I know there's some farming going on within the Forge, the player created content, but I really haven't checked out the stuff yet. I tried one quest and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of reading, and I basically went through a little tavern and there was a sorcerer that ambushed me, and there was a little story to it, and it was quite nice. It was only text, no voice acting, but still I hope to see people really doing good quests in the future. And there are little secrets hidden in the dungeons and the outdoor areas. This little door is something that you can only open if you have a dungeoneering kit, or you have the right class, which I think is the Great Weapon Fighter. But everybody can buy these kits, they're not expensive, but in the beginning at least, I didn't have them around all the time, so it was nice finding this little secret. And sometimes also in the dungeons, behind maybe a little carpet, you'll find a surprise. And this one really made me happy, because I know the mimics from different games, but the first time I encountered a mimic was definitely in the Monster Manual. I like that they include stuff like this that's not forced down your throat, but it's actually an optional that you just find randomly. Sometimes you have hidden merchants also, like this were-rat.
Well, this is awkward, isn't it?
There are small puzzles in the game, but it's very, very simple so far. There was this one puzzle in an early dungeon where you had to find a little note that was right next to the puzzle, and it said how to turn certain levers, and then you could go and collect an extra optional chest. And later on you get simple puzzles. I'm not really sure if I can call this a puzzle, like this one where you line up some statues and you open a door. The story is really simple as far as I can tell, but a lot of it just makes sense to me because you know the Forgotten Realms world, and therefore you just accept a lot of stuff that is not necessarily explained to you. In the beginning, after you washed up on the beach, you end up fighting your way on the big bridge here towards Neverwinter gates. You bring down this big harbinger, and that kind of sets off your status and your reputation in Neverwinter. So after you bring down this harbinger, Sergeant Knox, which kind of acts like the quest hub for the first 20 levels at least, tells you that this rebel group called the Nashers are trying to steal the crown of the current Lord of Neverwinter. So you go after them into this vault, and unfortunately they get away with the crown. You're halted by this Guardian of the Nine. So it feels a bit weird to have already stopped some kind of invasion and then being pulled into a completely different storyline. But it kind of feels alright to me, again, because I know Lord Nasher, so when I heard about that storyline, I was already getting excited for no reason, because I remember some of the stuff from the first Neverwinter game that I played. So really it builds upon something that's already existing in my brain. And you end up hunting down the local leader of the Nashers, maybe we'll see them later, called Karsov. And that's for the time being the end to that storyline. Afterwards we go to the Tower District, and this is all about the orcs. You form a shaky alliance with the half-orcs that apparently before you came were fighting alongside the orcs. And here's an example on some of the voice acting in the game. You can see how the body language is sometimes a bit funny. It goes really over the edge with some of the same animations over and over, and you feel kind of like they should just tone it down a bit. Like, some of the animations are maybe okay, but they use them way too often, and more times than not, it's kind of awkward to look at the person you're talking to. So finally you get the first 5-man dungeon quest, and that's at the end of this area. And at this point I was level 19, because I actually wanted to wait for a friend to get up at my level, but then I got impatient and played on a bit. And I really recommend going this first dungeon as early as possible, because it is quite easy. This was a totally unexperienced group. I think a lot of the players had only been here once, but still it seemed a bit too easy, and this final boss fight wasn't even a problem. We have one guy going down a bit, but that's mostly because I was the only healer and I wasn't really healing. I was just doing full DPS. And he didn't go, nobody went down once. So after you dealt with the orcs, you go on to deal with the spell plague.
Look who's here. Should we kill you in front of your little wife, Joseph?
Keep away from my
One of the men from the City Watch's wife has this spell plague. So you first go on a mission to save her. And as a part of this process, you also have to accompany her through a complete quest, where you continuously have to pour elixir down her throat. And I really hope they fix that, because it seemed very bugged out. Like, she just wanted to drink elixir all the time. But eventually she does become a help, and you can see in this small clip here that she's quite an effective ally. So you're introduced to this warlock that at first glance appears to be a friend, but it turns out that he is just collecting these spell-plagued people to finally empower himself to become a half-god. And this is the final story quest that I've done so far, and I really hope the difficulty ramps up later on, because it's been a little bit too easy so far. I think one of the nice things that wrapped me in the story is kind of the notion to have to go through Neverwinter again. I love that. Because, of course, I played Neverwinter in the first Neverwinter game. And I remember how long it took for me to clear the 4 different districts. And, of course, they did choose different districts for this one. It's not completely the same. But you kind of get the notion that you're starting out small. And I like that. Like, only going to the different districts in the town. And now after level 20 I really hope that the game opens up and lets you to go different places in the world.
Possible. I was supposed to be a god.
So you can also do PvP from level 10 and up, and it's really fun. It's a lot of fun. It's very easy to hop into, and even the first time I did at level 10, I didn't feel like I was completely underpowered. I think this clip you're watching now is actually the first PvP I ever did. So I don't even have the full array of my abilities, and I didn't even really understand how to use my divine power at this point, which is pretty important because you can make your blast wave throw people back, and that's a really good way of getting melees off your back. So it's a lot of fun, and you actually feel like most of the abilities you put down have an impact on whether or not you're going to die or you're going to take them down. It's not like it's really a Twitch game, but I can imagine it really growing into a a fun addition to the game. I can really imagine it being a fun addition to the game all the way through if it's well balanced. At least in the beginning, I don't feel a big balance discrepancy between the classes. But that could definitely change, because I only played 2 full rounds, and it's pretty long rounds of... they call it domination. And I haven't even checked out if there are other mods for the PvP. This is the only map I played. I know there is one other map that you can play from 10 to 19. But this is the only one I got twice. And it's basically a capture the flag sort of thing, where you have to capture 3 points and hold them to get more tickets than the other team. I played the cleric, but I really tried to avoid my healing abilities, because I didn't feel like I really needed them so far. So it is a quite linear path when you go down the power tree for your character. It's a limited amount of choices, but I really try to just go for as much DPS as possible. But at one point you do have to pick the first healing ability that's optional. Whenever I play with some other cleric, I feel very much the same. And I really hope later down the line we're gonna see some more ways to specialize your character and make him unique. So I finally reached level 20 and got my horse. And it's all good. I'm gonna play on and post another video. This was the milk. See you.